What ends up happening with a lot of people who chase FIRE is they get to FIRE and then they don't know what to do. You are financially independent when you have enough personal net wealth to live on. So that's only possible if your income from other sources where you don't work actively is able to outweigh the expenses that you have. When your passive income exceeds your annual spending, you can retire. Here, the definition of retire early in FIRE is not an age. So it's a point in time where you can be confident that your state is that on an ongoing basis, my passive income can exceed my annual spending. The financial stability comes from assets that you can actually use. Many of us miss the component of health. If you start with a generous, balanced financial mindset from a young age, you will have a balanced financial mindset when you are old. Dying with billions of dollars is meaningless. How are you using your time? You know the old adage, time is money, right? Because there's always an opportunity cost behind it. As I always do, I put up the financial disclaimer. Please don't take this as personal financial advice, but I'm sure you guys are smart enough not to do so. I'm just reminding you that if you're not already online on the NAS platform, you'll be able to get all the other information there. There's lots of things that get sent out post and pre each seminar, so be sure to keep up to date on the WhatsApp group and on the platform, because that enables you to have all the information that you need. And also there's recordings from the previous webinars available here. So if you go online, you'll be able to get the recordings if you weren't able to be present, or if you need one from tonight as a refresher. These are the dates for the next couple. So we have one in June and then July, and then we have a special event in August, which we'll tell you about next month, so you can save the date in August to be able to make sure you get there. Next topic, next presentation is titled, I Just Want to Have Funds, and the following one is Living on Borrowed Dime. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation this evening, but be sure to put those dates, the 13th of June, the 11th of July, the second Friday of every month, to be able to find out a little bit more information. So tonight, grow big or go home. Now, for those of you who are around approximately 2017, 2018, you might recognize this guy. Does anyone know who he is? His name is Bernard Salt. He's one of Australia's most popular commentators on social anthropological issues. And he was the one who coined the phrase, or coined the meme, as it was known then, around Smashed Arvo. And the reason why he was doing that, he was commentating on people's complaints about the cost of living. And he said, millennials like to complain about the cost of living, but then on the weekend, they go and eat Smashed Arvo at a brunch place, which cost them $15 at the time. Now it's like $23, $50 or $30 if you add an egg next to it. And so that became the catchphrase associated with high cost of living. So much so that people were so enthused at that comment. You would have seen on the left-hand side here, Ray White, a popular real estate agent, decided to put this on the billboard advertising the house. If you buy the house, you get free avocado on toast for 1 year, because that was around the concept of cost of living. Now, fast forward to 2025, cost of living is still the same. For those of you who followed the recent election, you know that some of the politicians were campaigning on a cost of living basis, saying, you know, we need to do something about it, we need to reduce your tax, we need to do this, we need to do that. Smashed Arvo has become the catchphrase for challenges and worries about personal finance. And so that brings us to our topic today. Last presentation, if you were here, you would recognize this chart. Describes the 2D view that most people have. You start off, you have your education, you spend 40 years of your life working, and then you eventually retire at 65, and then you enjoy your life for 14 years, and then you die. It's pretty sad, isn't it? And somewhere in between, that means the smashed avocado can only be enjoyed here. Between here and here, you can't have anything. Does it sound like an exciting thing for you? No, not at all. For those of you who like avocado, no. For those of you who don't, maybe that's great. But instead of this 2D concept timeline, we realized, and we talked a little bit around the concepts of the different bases related to financial freedom. We talk about home base being living and growing, and then base one being the phase of life where you save, Phase 2 being the phase of life that you amplify. Phase 3 being the phase where you protect, and you're kind of trying to get back to home base in between all of these things to live and grow. And so today we're going to delve more into that concept to understand a little bit more what that practically means. Now, if you guys did some of the pre-reading beforehand, you'll be ahead. If you didn't, it's okay, I'll help you. But it might require you to exercise your brain for a short period of time tonight, especially if you don't like numbers. Now, I'm not going to quote all sorts of numbers on the screen, but at least I'm going to show you at 4 figures, which gives you some indication as to how we're going to arrive at some of the conclusions that we talk about tonight. Okay? So if you don't like numbers, I encourage you to either take out paper and pen or a phone just in case you need it. If you like numbers, it will all be in your brain. You can follow along on the screen as well. So there are 4 key concepts that we started to talk about last presentation I should say, and we're going to work on them as the basis of what I'm going to delve into today. How do you grow big and go home? The first concept is around your earning. Most people, for them, earning comes from your income. The second big concept is around spending. For most people, that's related to direct expenditure. Now, if you did your pre-reading, you might have already got a picture in your mind how much you earn a year and how much you spend. Does anyone have you don't have to tell me how much you earn or spend. Does anyone know what their earning and spending capacity is like? Okay, we've got 1 good student, 2, 3, fantastic. You guys did your pre-reading. I like these types of people to the presentation. The others, it's okay. We're gonna give you a generic Australian spending expenditure level. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, let's start off with spending. These are figures taken based on the Australian Bureau of Statistics, ABS. If you can't see, I'll read out the numbers for you because it's a little bit small from the back. But this is the average monthly spend for Australians per year. Now, this is for a millennial who is about 35. That's the statistics that I just used. You spend about $3,800 a month, which is about $45,600 a year. Now, if you divide that, about 20K is not related to rent. This is assuming you don't own your own home. And about 26,000 is related to rent. Now, for some of you, this might be a correct number. For some of you, it may not be. It depends on what your spending is like. There are lots of things here: health and fitness, dining out and takeaway, public transport, utilities, groceries, so on and so forth. Some of you might own a car. The pricing is different. You notice that there are no discretionary items on the screen that some of you might spend on. Some people ask about the insurance and so on and so forth. But for a simplistic view, I'm just going to use this number, 45,600. Okay, everyone got that number? First number, we spend about 45,000 a year. So we go to the second one. The second one is here. So in the top right corner, I'm going to assume that all of us earn $100,000 a year, just for rounded purposes. It's easy. The average Australian income is higher than that. It's slightly lower than that. But for argument's sake, we're just going to call it 100K because it rounds everything off. After tax, which is about 23K, you take home $77,000. So if you were following the last presentation and you followed the instructions from the videos, the pre-reading videos, people suggest that you save approximately 20%. So we're going to work from here. You earn 100K, you take home 77,000, you save 20% of that, which is about 15,000 per year. Sorry about the font. So that leaves you $61,000 and you spend 45. So you have about 15,000 floating around, which you could do whatever you want with. Travel, save some more, maybe buy a car, maybe put it down as a deposit for a house. That's approximate, okay? So this is just approximate. So 100K earning, 77K take home, save 15K, spend 45. You guys following so far? Am I too many numbers? All good? Now the next question is, you've got your income, you've got your savings, so this is usually the earning bit. You've got your spending and expenditure. Now the key question is, what is your net worth? Remember I talked about that last time? Net worth or net wealth. Your net worth or net wealth is your assets minus your liabilities. In other words, your house, your car, your income, your savings, your investments, minus your debt, your mortgage, your HECS, your loans, other things that you need to pay back. Did anyone calculate their net wealth? Okay, 3, 4. Some people told me they were scared, so they didn't calculate it. Some people forgot. Some people just don't want to know, right? Well, if you didn't, let me just give you the average again, just to help you out, okay? So average salary, we said 77K post-tax. Average expenditure, about 45,000. Average savings, about 15,000. This is for a Australian millennial couple, two people. Here, their net worth is about 757,000. In other words, their assets, when they're about 35 in Australia, having assumed they grew up and worked in Australia all their life, is their assets is 1.165 million, and then minus about 410,000 mortgage payments and HECS and so on and so forth, to about $757,000. So if you divide that by 2, the net worth for a 35-year-old millennial in Australia, single, is about $378,000. So please don't cry if you're worried. Please don't be scared. This is average, okay? And it really changes because if you were not born in Australia, or if you haven't worked here for, say, 15 years of your life or 10 years of your life, this number is very different. So superannuation is a big deal because that's at least 10% or more in recent years of income that would have built up over 10 years. And you remember that superannuation is not just a static amount, it builds including investment and compounding over time. So for many people, this is assuming they went to uni at 18, they finished at 22, and they started working from, say, 23 all the way to 35. So that's like 10 years of work minimum. So if you're worried about this number, that's because of this. The other thing is also, this is assuming that they've managed to purchase a house together, combined income, and they have a mortgage on it. So this number may differ. Please don't be scared. It's just to give you a concept and an understanding. Now, for those super geeks, we'll give you a resource that you can go and calculate everything up to the nth degree, red color, green color, pie chart, graph chart, Excel sheet. Some people look at this and cry, right? Some people look at it and love it, especially if they do it for a living on a day-to-day basis. So if you're super interested, this is an example of a net worth calculator. You just have to plug certain numbers in and it can give you stipulations. It breaks down your asset types, it breaks down your investment types, whole range of things. This is for the people who want advanced analytics. You can come and speak to me later, we'll send it out. We'll send it out as a post reading for you. I've got one more, even more exciting one coming up, so I'll show you in a second. Now, we looked at this graph last time because we said that most people in their mind think of traditional net worth as starting at 20 years old and you just keep building up. But the problem is, if you follow this line, if you die at 80, then you've got $3 million sitting in the bank doing nothing. It's nice for the people who inherit the $3 million, and not so nice for you, right? So for most people, actually, the optimal net worth starts here, but peaks at the time of retirement, and then they're able to enjoy their retirement. So trying to hoard from a scarcity mindset, remember presentation 1, to try and maximize your net worth when you're 75, it's not as helpful as trying to understand that this curve is probably a little bit better. And that's what this is basically saying. I'm going to explain why this concept is important. This is graphical format. Now I'm going to do the numbers. I know some people here like to look at graphs, some people like to look at numbers, so I'm going to use both tonight. So just recap one more time, especially for those of you who the font was a little bit small. Take-home salary, 77K. Saving, 15,000, so that leaves you 60K. After 60K, you spend 45, that gives you about 15,000 extra. And your net worth should be about 378,000 if you're a single person, assuming you worked here all your life and have super. So why is Daryl quoting all these numbers? It doesn't help me. There's no money coming out of the computer or the screen to allow me to eat avocado and go home. Well, here's why. We started talking about this concept of FIRE last week, financial independence and retiring early. And today we're going to dive a little bit more into this concept. And I'm going to explain why this is important. And I had to give you those numbers because those numbers are important in talking about this topic in more detail. I also described to you last time about the different types of mindsets that people have. Planning ahead, avoiding debt, reducing spending, earning as much as possible, investing as much as possible, investing appropriately. These are all things that we talked about last presentation. So I'm going to assume that you are doing them or have thought about them, or maybe you have already started to do some or more of these things in a more robust fashion. I'm going to dive into the two parts of FIRE, FI, financial independence, and then RE, retiring early. Financial independence has two components. The first component of financial independence is this. You are financially independent when you have enough personal net wealth to live on. In other words, you don't have to work actively for basic expenses and necessities. So if you're a numbers person, if you follow the numbers from the previous screen, if I spend $45,000 every year, I'm financially independent when I do not have to work to earn $45,000. So that's only possible if your income from other sources where you don't work actively, people also call this passive income, is able to outweigh the expenses that you have. So let me put it together for you in a simple sentence. Using that $45,000 number, you are financially independent when you don't have to go to work to earn the $45,000, and some other way that doesn't involve you getting up out of bed every day to go to work can pay that $45,000. Can you guys think of some other ways that may be possible? Anyone? Investment? Fred? Rubber band? Rubber bank? No. That's actively working. You have to actively rubber band. Win the lotto. Some people would say that is also active because you actually have to put money in. Sorry? Royalties? Yeah, that's a good one. Fantastic. Rent, so investment property and someone pays you rent. So those are forms of passive income. Okay. So basically this screen is saying you are financially independent when your passive income pays for your expenses so that your work can be for anything else than earning money. Could be for fun, could be for intellectual stimulation, could be for saving the world, could be to have world peace, to bring about world peace, could be to cure cancer. It could be purpose-driven, meaning-driven, it could be anything, but not necessarily for money. Okay, so that's the first part. That's the first part of FIRE. The second part of FIRE, we'll come to it in a second, is retiring early. But I'm going to show you the three components of financial independence. Now, I'm going to blow it up on the screen, so if you can't see it, it's okay. There are three components to this. So there are two basic foundational points. And the three components to financial independence are as follows. So if you are hoping to go big and grow big, this is what you need to do. Number one, you need to focus on saving. In other words, 50% or more where possible. So you remember the earlier screen, if you earned $100,000, after tax it's $77,000. If you save 20%, it's $15,000 of savings. So to save 50%, you're actually saving closer to $35,000 a year. Remember we had the extra $15,000? 15 plus 15 is about 30. So that means if you spend $45,000 from your 60, you have to save everything else. People are looking at me a bit unhappy now because I've just burst your bubble. There goes the holiday, right? Whilst working active income jobs. So you maximize your saving when you're actively working. That's point one of FIRE. This is what people call the traditional FIRE. Point number two, when you are able to have some income, not only do you need to save, but whatever income you don't save, you need to invest. Your increased income doesn't mean you have increased knowledge, but it's very important for you to understand the concept of investing because you're trying to build your passive income. So in other words, what this is trying to say is that you can only get financial independence one of two ways. This is the basis. This is not my theory. This is the FIRE movement. They're saying you can either save a lot or you can invest a lot because when you invest a lot, it makes money for you. So you either make more or save more. Does that make sense? The third component of financial independence, so one is save 50% or more. Number two is invest as much as possible in low-cost assets that don't cost you lots for management. And the third one is a 28-36 rule. The 28-36 rule goes like this. No more than 28% of your gross monthly income should be spent on housing, whether that's rental or mortgage. Because that is the approximate level where if you spend too much, you will have not enough. For example, if you spend more than 30% of your monthly income on rent, you will not have enough to save or to invest. If you spend more than 30% of your gross monthly income on paying off your mortgage, you may go backwards in terms of generating a passive income source or investing to generate passive income over time. And the last one is no more than 36% on all your debts, because if you spend too much paying off your debt, then you realize that actually this is a red flag that you're having too much debt in the first place. Okay? So what are the 3 foundational principles of financial independence? Traditional FIRE says, number 1, save as much as you can. Number 2, invest in things that are low cost, low management, but give you good passive income. And number 3, try and apply the 28-36 rule. There's a balance between too much luxury, spending too much money on a nice big house when you may not need it, versus paying off all your debts versus saving and investing. There's a balance to be found. Now, again, this is not personal financial advice, right? So if you don't have the 28-36 rule, please don't leave the door and say, Daryl said 28-36 rule, now I have to move out of my house and live on the street. No, that's not what I'm saying. But this is a rough estimate to give you a balance of what it is to earn and spend and save and invest. Because if you remember the first screen, $45,000 from that average Australian spends more than 50% of expenses on a house. Remember the rent, $2,200. And if you guys, anyone is renting here, rental prices never go down. They only go up. Housing prices generally in Australia also don't usually go down. They usually go up. So this is becoming more and more challenging. Now you know why when the newspaper says cost of living, people are always complaining about houses because that is a huge chunk of their saving, a huge chunk of their spending per year.
Is the 36 also from the gross?
Sorry?
Is the 36% also from the gross?
Yeah. Okay, everyone following so far? Yeah, I hope you're not too sad. Now let's talk about stress. Okay, don't worry. We're talking about retirement now. Okay, here we go. So financial independence, the second part is retiring early. So retiring early happens when 2 things happen. The first thing is when your passive income exceeds your annual spending, you can retire. Let me just repeat that again. When your passive income, when you don't need to get out of bed in the morning to work, but you can still generate income. If Gordon writes a book and the book is earning him royalties of over $45,000, Gordon can retire. Right? But unfortunately, books usually don't give you $45,000 in royalties unless some of you have written books before that are bestsellers. So point 1 is, in order for you to do that, you need to make sure your asset base is enough to generate whatever you need to spend per year. Number 2, you can retire early approximately when you can get to this, and the calculations that we will do in a second to get to this number or get to this place are usually assuming you retire for 30 years. Now, not everyone retires for 30 years. So let me give you what I mean by that. The calculations are based on 30 years, but it may not be fully accurate. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Most people in Australia, generally speaking, we say the retirement age is 65 or 67. Let's say 65 for round purposes. 30 years after 65 is 95. Most generally speaking, the average life expectancy of Australians is about 80, 84, somewhere to 80, 84. So you only live really 20 to 25 years after. So the 30 years is a generous calculation, right? This is average. But if you retired at 50, 30 years is what? 80. You may still be alive and you may have no more money. Remember that earlier curve? People want to hoard their wealth all the way. When we are asking people to do, what people are asking you to do in FIRE is to use that black curve where there's a drop-off. And so people say you have to be careful because the calculations are based on 30 years. So if you retire at 45, then the calculation stretches to 75. So you might be a little bit short at the end. So you're just going to be careful of the calculation. Just bear that in mind. Okay? No one wants to retire early anymore. Okay. So here's the thing when we talk about retiring early, right? Most people are worried that retiring early means as soon as I retire, I start to play golf or start to go to the beach or start to travel on a cruise around the world. Now, retirement early here, the definition of retire early in FIRE is not an age. It is a state. So it's a point in time where you can be confident that your state is that on an ongoing basis, my passive income can exceed my annual spending. So hypothetically, what that means is that you no longer have to work actively. So if that happens at 45 or 50 or 55, it doesn't mean you immediately have to go to the golf course. What it means is that you have the luxury of doing things for different purposes. You could volunteer, you could go to the golf course if you wanted to, but you don't need to. So here's how we calculate that number. Okay, everyone ready? There's two rules. There's two ways of doing this. You want the complicated way or the easy way? I'll give you both because some people like to understand the logic behind it. For those who want the straightforward way, here's how you do it. Take the number of your annual spending and you multiply that number by 25 times. That is the number you need to retire for 30 years. Yeah? So if you're going to retire, you need this number for 30 years. So assuming you retire at 65 to 95, you need this number. So I used the number before. Remember the spending number? If you spend $45,600 every year, you times 25 is about 1.14 million you need to retire, to live for 30 years and be okay. Scared yet? Okay, for those of you who want the more complicated way of reasoning, how did we get to that 25 number? Did someone just pluck it from the air? How can it be 25 when you need it for 30 years? Well, this is how it works. There's a 4% rule that was devised by a US economist when they did some financial modeling. And this 4% rule basically says if you estimate your annual spending and you divide it by 4%, you'll get the approximate amount you need for a 30-year retirement when you can withdraw 4% of your net worth every year. So when you hit retirement age, you can take out 4% plus inflation year on year and be okay for about 30 years. If you do it, if you did 45,600 divided by 4%, you'll get to the same number. So it approximately ends up at the same number. Now that is not fully, this is an American model, so there are some computations for Australians, but by and large, this rule is it's quite solid. If you take out less than 4%, if you take out 3%, it will last you 50 years of retirement. Yeah? So if you only extract 3%. So you can really quickly see that while it sounds like a whole jumble of numbers, FIRE is really based around maximizing your earning, maximizing your saving, maximizing your passive income, and reducing your spending, which is what we talked about last time, right? Earning over spending. So now let's put it all together. I haven't even got to the exciting part yet for today. Let's put it all together. Now here is a nice FIRE calculator, okay? So we'll give this to you after the presentation. You don't need to do it any way yourself. You can just literally plug the numbers in. Now I want you to follow. I'm going to try and point out here. Is the pointer working? Maybe not. I'm going to use my finger. So I'm going to work my way down. This is the graph of this stuff. So if you like numbers, follow the left. If you like the graph, follow the right. I've assumed that someone is 35 years old, and what I've said is that expenses every year is $45,600. Yep, that's the number we used before. So you see why I bring all the numbers in. That's why if you have your numbers, this makes a lot more sense for you. This is a Google sheet that we will give to you that you can plug your numbers straight in. How much do you currently have in Super? 150,000. Where did I get that number from? I took it from the first screen within the net worth screen. Yeah? So I'm just pulling the numbers that we've already talked about into this calculator. 228,000 is your net worth. So this plus this equals 370,000. Remember I said that the average net worth for a couple in Australia is 757,000 divided by 2. So this is just estimates. Again, you got to put your own numbers into this. How much do you earn gross income a year? 100,000. Yep. How much super do you get? I put it at 12%. And so your net income post-tax is 77K, matches all the numbers we calculated before. I'm not lying to you. These numbers are real. Yeah. I also assume that you have a mortgage which is $600,000 loan value, so your house is about 800K, your 30-year loan, and you've paid off 200,000, your interest rate is 6%, just for argument's sake. When you plug all these numbers in, this calculator estimates that you can retire, you are 35 now, you can retire in 19 years in 2044. So how old will you be then? About 54. Hey, that's pretty good. So if you continue on this rate, assuming that you withdraw 4% rule, remember we talked about, and that your investments earn 8% a year on year, on average, you will be able to retire at 2044. So this is the year 2044, the yellow curve, for those of you who like graphs. This is net worth, yeah, coming down like this. This is 2044, you can retire, and 2050 is your preservation year, which is usually about 65, 67 years old in Australia, 60 plus. So you see there's a gap. What you thought you could get there, you can get there earlier. Pretty exciting, isn't it? Anyone want to retire at 55 instead of 65? Earlier. Okay, well, May, you're not... Here's what you're going to do, okay? I'm going to give you scenario number 2. Scenario number 2 is if you reduce your... If I just took out rental, if you suddenly had a very nice, rich auntie that allowed you to stay in their house, you don't have to pay rent, right? How much was rent? $20,000 a year. So I just made the expenses move from 45 to 25. I just took out the rent, yeah? Look at what happens. You can retire in 9 years in 2034.
Oh, wow.
So if you if you find a nice auntie or uncle or your mom or dad or whoever it is or a nice friend who will let you stay rent free, not just in their head but in their house, and you reduce your expenses from 45 to 25,000, you can retire in 9 years at 2034. How old will you be then? About 45 years old. And remember, retiring early doesn't mean, 45, I don't have to work anymore, but you don't have to have the pressure of going to work every day for a job you don't enjoy, for a job that you don't like. But remember, if you retire at 45, the money only lasts till what? 75. So you've got to be a little bit careful there, right? So this is right down to the nth degree. So the problem and the challenge with this is that there are some criticism. This is FIRE. So I presented FIRE in a very tight nutshell for you. Here's one of the challenges, 5 challenges. Number 1, focus is only on money. So far, I just talked numbers. I haven't talked anything except numbers tonight, right? Income, spending, expenditure. And some of you are looking at me like, Daryl's talking about numbers. It's just going over my head like this because I'm not a numbers person. It's too hard. Just ask someone else to figure out for me. And then you go home afterwards and you're like, this Daryl, man, too many numbers. Just call my accountant. This guy scared me. Now all I know is scared. The accountant is sitting next to you. Yeah, that's a good one. Number 2 is this encourages a scarcity mindset because what you guys are jealous of is someone who has a place where they can stay, and then, there's only $25,000. And so now, all of a sudden, the mindset shifts from maybe being a little bit more comfortable, enjoying avocado on toast to, no, I can't. I need to put that money into that. Remember the graph that Daryl showed me last week? I cannot eat avocado. Every time you see avocado on toast now, you remember this graph, right? But not only that, what that encourages is that you are scrimping and saving, and you may adopt what we talked about in the very first presentation, which is you become a person that's only fixated on hoarding. Because you're rushing and rushing and rushing to retire. And what that means is that you move from one rat race of life to another rat race of life. Now, I don't know about you, I don't want to be a rat. Because someone is always chasing a rat. You can be a rat at work and someone is chasing you, and you can be a rat on fire and someone is chasing you too, right? Number 3, there's no buffer. What happens if you fall sick? What happens if you get cancer? I don't wish that on anyone. What happens if you are in an accident? And this is something very real for my profession. If my colleagues who do surgery, they lose a limb or a finger, they can't do surgery for the rest of their life. And then they were chasing this thing, and then now it's stuck. So this just assumes life is perfect, right? Every year I'm going to earn this much money and my income doesn't change. I'm not made redundant. No, I don't get married. I'm a single person. I can retire in 9 years. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to eat avocado. I'm never going to do anything because I need that 9 years. There's no buffer in this exercise. Number 4, this entire thing is centered on you retiring. It's on self-fulfillment. If I tick that box, I've made it. I'm financially independent and I have retired early. Number 5, it lacks enjoyment and fun and meaning. You know, people have fire parties. They go there and tell you, how close am I to fire? It's a bit sad, you know. I find. That's my personal opinion. I think they're well-meaning. But what that ends up being is that you become so fixated on this that you don't know how to enjoy the meaning of life. So it doesn't mean fire is a bad thing. It's a good thing. But there has to be more than just fire. Because if it's just fire, we will be looking at that graph and we'll be crying every night because we're getting further and further away because the house price is going up and the rent is going up and the expenses are going up and you want to run your marathon and the price is going up and everything is going up. And then we're like, oh no, this is getting worse. It's further and further away. It was 9 years and now it's 10 years and now it's 11 years and we run into this trap. And that's why people say the cost of living in Australia has become a joke because it just keeps climbing. That's why people are chasing a dream that seems to be so far away. So tonight, I'm going to propose that there is something slightly different to going big. And that is the concept of FPHAT FIRE. Now, most people talk about FPHAT this way. I'm going to spell it this way. Okay? FPHAT, FPHAT FIRE. And here's why. F stands for finances, but I think there's 4 other components that go into the concept of growing big and allowing you to go home. I'm going to talk about each of them individually. So from a financial perspective, what does that look like? So you take what we talked about in what we call traditional FIRE and you bring it across to FPHAT FIRE. Here's what it means. Instead of just having 1 times your passive income, i.e. 45,000, what you're really aiming for is up to 3 times your passive income. Because what that allows you to do is allows you some buffers. But most of the time, this is also for people who, when they get to that stage, mainly when you calculate that, many people have families. So kids cost a lot of money. I'm not sure if you know. I'm sorry to say for those of you who are pregnant in the room. Yeah. If you want to FIRE, do not have kids, okay? I'm just saying. The average Australian kid costs approximately $1 million by the time from 0 to finishing uni. You include all the costs involved. So that's why this concept here of having 3 times your passive income is to buffer yourself against potentially having kids. And those who are thinking about having kids are maybe rethinking it now, but that's the reality. So that's why aiming for that gives you some buffer. Number 2, you're really looking for asset growth, looking for assets that have growth with minimal management. For most people in Australia, we talked about that in the first presentation, the concept of houses are very important. Because houses, when you think about houses, the value is in the land, not in the building, right? So do you have to do anything to the land for the value to grow up? Usually you just wait for time. It goes up and down a little bit, but generally over time, most places, those of you in construction can tell me otherwise, but most of the time, the land value increases over time. So that's assets with minimal management. Anything else that grows with time? Anyone know? Savings, yes, to a degree. In a savings account, you mean? Yeah. Sorry? Plants. They need a lot of management. My plants need a lot of management. Sorry. Yes and no, because it depends on the types of stocks. They may go down, right? So they don't always grow. Generally speaking, we think they grow, but they don't always. So other people talk about random assets. Musical instruments usually don't go down. Sorry? Gold is another example. People talk about gold or precious metals. People, sorry? Lego. Jewelry? Lego. Yeah. Yeah. Hermes handbags. But you first have to be able to afford that and then you'll be able to allow it to grow, right? So what this is trying to say is that if you're able to invest in assets that are reasonable, you want assets that can grow with time with minimal management. Number 3, being able to diversify your investments or diversify your assets, which we'll talk about next presentation, so be sure to come back, is very important because it gives you resilience. When a US president decides to put tariffs on and one of your assets drops, your other assets are not necessarily affected. Number 4, you need to think about a rainy day 1-year fund. In other words, you need $45,600 extra as a 1-year rainy day fund if you need $45,000. If you need $100,000, you need a $100,000 rainy day fund because if you are not able to work for a year, that's really important. Now, in that rainy day fund, that may be income protection insurance. Some of you are aware of that concept. So that will pay you out starting from 3 months, usually 60, 90 days, 30, 60, 90 days after that. If that's something that you are considering, that's where that type of rainy day fund comes in. But the problem with traditional FIRE is there's no rainy day. It's like you have 45,600, as soon as you hit 45,601, you can retire. That's very dangerous. Number 5, when you're investing in assets, which we'll talk a bit more about next week, invest in assets rather than concepts. Okay? Many people will say cryptocurrency is a concept. This is not a debate. You can ask me, you can talk about that later. But invest in assets that you can see. Here's why. In a crash, in a rainy day, if you have a house, you can live in a house. But you can't live with crypto, right? It's not, that's what people say. It's not a physical asset. So that's one of the challenges, is that it doesn't mean you cannot invest in cryptocurrency, but what that means is that the financial stability comes from assets that you can actually use. Can you use a Hermes bag? Probably, but only for looking nice. But when it's raining, that's a very expensive umbrella. Rainy day fund. No, this is not rainy day bag, okay? Rainy day fund. But there are other components of FPHAT, okay? So F is the finance component. There's PHAT. P stands for purpose. What about your kids? What about family? What about your contribution to society? What about your calling, your meaning, the things that bring joy in your life? If you're just focused all day on your financial independence deadline, you forget about the purpose. And so what ends up happening with a lot of people who chase FIRE is they get to FIRE and then they don't know what to do. Because they've spent all their life, their purpose is driving to FIRE. And then they get to FIRE and then they're like, what do I do now? And they're actually quite sad in retirement because there's nothing to do. So I would rather take a few years longer to get to retirement but really know what my purpose is than rush to retirement and not know what my purpose is. You know the people who, I have some of the families that I look after, and I can tell you the story because it's public. It was featured in a news article. I have a patient who has a foster carer who only looks after kids with special needs. Do you know how old she is? Anyone want to guess? She's definitely past retirement age, I can tell you that much.
75.
She's about 78 years old. And when there was one special needs kid who was put up for adoption and no one wanted to adopt, she adopted the kid. So she now is the legal guardian for that kid. And why? She doesn't do it for money. I can tell you it's definitely not for money. But it's because it gives her calling and meaning in life. So she thinks she told me when I saw her last, she's done about 35 different special needs kids over the course of her foster carer life. That brings great meaning to her. She's not retiring anytime soon. You know what she told me? The social care services will have to carry me out in a coffin before I stop doing my foster caring. So she's going to do it until she can't do it anymore because that's what gives her purpose. So I would say she's got financial independence, she's got enough money to survive, but she has a lot of purpose. Now if I asked you, do you have that same purpose today, what would you say? Yes, not so sure over there. So that's something to think about, right? Number 2, health. Many of us miss the component of health. In our rush to save, in our rush to be financially independent, we forget about our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health as well. So you may get to financial independence, but you may be broken. That's not where you want to be. You want to be able to enjoy your retirement, not to be able to suffer through it. Number 3, what type of mindset are you adopting? When I did this presentation last, someone said a really interesting comment. If you are rushing to FIRE all the time, you kind of suddenly flick the switch when you get to financial independence and suddenly be generous. If you've been hoarding your money for 30 years and then it's like, now retire, now I'm going to give everyone money. No, you're going to keep it all for yourself because that's the habit that you've cultivated for such a long period of time. So one of the challenges about approach with traditional FIRE is that it encourages you to be selfish. It doesn't mean everyone who does FIRE is selfish, but it doesn't encourage generosity. And in the 5th presentation, we're going to talk about that concept. If you start with a generous, balanced financial mindset from a young age, you will have a balanced financial mindset when you are old. It's easy to say, but I'm not sure if you've seen a newspaper recently. Bill Gates wants to give away his entire fortune by 2040, right? He said he wants to give it away because for him, dying with billions of dollars is meaningless. And to be fair, whether you like Bill Gates or not, he has been consistently giving money over a long period of time. He has the money, yes, but he's still giving it away. You can have the money and keep the money. And there are plenty of billionaires who have the money and keep the money. So his approach has always been one that has been consistent over time. And that's something for us to be really conscious of, because if we think that one day we can just flick the switch and suddenly I become a nice and generous person, or suddenly one day I can just become donate everything to charity, we have to think again, because that's not how our brain works. This approach is no different. If one day you think you can flick the switch and suddenly your physical health comes back, I think you're kidding yourself. So if we are not actively engaging, if you think that one day when you retire you can find purpose, you're kidding yourself. Because if you don't have purpose when you're working, you won't have purpose when you retire. It's very clear. So to me, when you leave the presentation tonight, I think this is more important than the number that the calculator spits out. Because that number on the calculator, you can manipulate the calculator. You can even get to the calculator, but you may not be happy when you get to that number. Number 4, last one. How are you using your time? You know the old adage, time is money, right? So yes, you may save 1 year and retire earlier, but how are you actually using it? If you're spending every single waking moment calculating whether you should buy the avocado, I would argue that you're not using your time wisely. Because there's always an opportunity cost behind it. There's always an opportunity cost behind that concept. I want to finish by telling you a story of 2 of my friends. Their names are Camilla and Joseph. This is Camilla, this is Joseph. They have 2 kids. Camilla and Joseph are big advocates of FPHAT. They don't go around talking about it all day, but they are I look up to them when it comes to this concept of FPHAT. They have retired from their day jobs. They used to work in banking. They moved halfway across the world when most people would have continued to stay in banking to earn their millions and millions of dollars. They had the capacity to earn millions of dollars, but they came to Australia as volunteers to chase their purpose. Camilla has a Brazilian background. She is super passionate about helping people to be healthy. So they moved to Newcastle and they started a restaurant, this thing called Food Pharmacy. Whole foods, plant-based restaurant. And so Camilla is now the main, this is the picture of the restaurant. I've actually been to the restaurant to have a look, cafe. Very nice. And they serve vegetarian food, whole food. You can see all the pictures. She does cooking classes. She does health retreats on all sorts of different things at a very, very small stipend wage that doesn't reward her for all the years of schooling and experience she's had. But for her, she's found purpose and meaning. Joseph gave up his career as a banker too. He was an investment banker. And now he's actually passionate about helping young people meet the things that they want to do in life and sharing with them about the concepts of finding purpose and meaning on a very minimal stipend type wage. For them, financial independence has been reached, but more importantly, health is important. They found their purpose. Their mindset and approach is one that not only benefits them, but anyone who visits this place, and the time they feel is being used wisely. So if you ever go to Newcastle, visit Food Pharmacy and find Joseph and Camilla, and they can tell you a little bit more. You see, King Solomon, our favorite rich person, told us, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. This is God's gift to man. It doesn't say, I perceive that there is nothing better than to be financially independent and retire early because this is God's gift to man. Solomon said, it's better for them to be happy and to do good as long as you live, which means what? Even into retirement, you have purpose, you have health, mental, spiritual, physical. Your approach is one that you're able to benefit other people, and you use your time wisely. This is true FPHAT. I would argue that people who just chase the number to be financially independent and retire early never are able to fulfill this in its truest form. Here are 5 thought questions I'm going to leave with you. Number 1, what brings you the most meaning and purpose in life, and what does it take to maintain this? Number 2, where do you see your career in 5 years? This is a question I'm asking myself almost on a daily basis at the moment. Number 3, what are your plans for your family? Are you happy in the home you live in? What would make you happier? Number 4, are you looking after your health? And if so, what do you need to do to maintain this? Number 5, what do you want to leave behind when you die? If you can answer these 5 questions by the end, not end of tonight. If you want end of tonight, you might be here for a few more hours. But by the end of the presentation series, you will be able to understand how you reach FPHAT. Here's why. If you want to look after your health, you may need to spend a little bit more money now, and that might mean that you have to take a gym membership, for example, which may mean that your financial retirement age may get pushed out a little bit more. But that's okay because that's what you need to do, and that's an expense that you need to make. If you feel like you need to upskill yourself to be able to reach your meaning and purpose in life, that may cost you some money now, but it has long-term benefits. So that's okay. Then you adjust your FPHAT. So when you go home, instead of rushing to your phone or your computer and opening that spreadsheet, Janelle will send to you and typing all the numbers in and going, yes, 11 years, I'm coming for you. Maybe have a think about what it is you actually want to do, because what you actually want to do may change the way you approach your earning and spending calculations. Does that make sense? I hope it's been helpful for you to think a little bit more about this. So we started from earning and spending and net wealth, and you can see why those things, while important, are hugely impacted by your purpose, your health, your approach, and what you want to do with your time. Because that revolutionarily changes your approach to financial independence and retiring early. If you have this, you can really grow big, and you can really go home, and you don't have to eat avocado at home every single time. You can go to the cafe and enjoy it too. All right, I'm going to pause here in case you have any questions or comments, and I can clarify any of the numbers or graphs that you want on the screen as well.